good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever in the world you are. Today is Leap Day. It's February 29th, 2024, and it's great to be here with you. We have a very special guest, Becca Chambers, who will be presenting on neurodiversity in the workplace, and I'm sure you'll find her comments absolutely fascinating. She's such an engaging person, and we will get to Becca in a moment, but first, let's go to Jeff Kachavin, my co-moderator, who has been told by Natalie Armstrong-Motan, the founder of this, how much in donations we've been told about to date to various food banks around the world. And so, Jeff, do you want to do the honors?
Absolutely, Jean. Thank you so much. I am delighted to report that since we began this series almost 5 years ago, our generous audiences have contributed $529,000, 241.52 to food banks in honor of our great speakers. Thank you so much. Back to you, Jean.
Great, that's fantastic. Actually, I think that we've done that in a little less than 4 years, because this is 2024 and it started in 2020.
Oh, yeah.
So better yet, how great this number is. And I'm sure that Becca, you will take us over the 530 mark and getting closer to 600,000 or 550, pick a number, $1 million. So that's a lot of meals. Thank you so much, all of you, for your generosity, both as speakers and as attendees. As you know, the Will Work for Food, the New Possibilities Hour, was a project founded by Natalie Armstrong-Motan in the spring of 2020 in response to the pandemic. And since at some point shortly thereafter, this turned into a weekly program. Jeff joined Natalie in moderating these programs, and then I've joined them in January of 2021. So we have been going for some time. There's no charge if you're new to the Will Work for Food programs. There's no charge for these. We just ask that if you're able to, that you make a donation in any amount to a food bank of either the speaker's suggested food bank or of your choice. And so there have been donations made to food banks. People have been fed around the world, and that's more than 5 million meals probably that have been served. So we keep track just by people sending an email or a notice to one of the three of us as to the amount of their donation, and we do not handle any money. So please keep up the good work, and thank you so much. Food bank, Becca will tell us about in a moment. Natalie has put the email ad, or not the email, the link to the website in the chat. It's the Silicon Valley Food Bank. And so they are one that we've supported, people have supported before, and I'm sure they will appreciate today's support. So with that said, let me introduce Becca to you. Becca is the Chief Communications Officer at Control Up in the San Francisco area, you know, Silicon Valley there. And she is an award-winning brand and communications executive with a focus on cybersecurity and enterprise technology. With 20, or just nearly 20 years experience, ranging from Fortune 500s to startups, she's especially well known for corporate transformation, branding and rebranding, and bringing outside of the box thinking to everything that she does. She is a passionate advocate for neurodiversity, and we're very honored and privileged to have her with us today. She is herself an executive with ADHD, and she has a son with dyslexia. She uses her experience to write and speak about the intersection of neurodiversity and the workplace, and she's been featured in outlets like the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, the New York Post, Fast Company, USA Today, and others. Becca has a Master of Science with distinction from the London School of Economics, a Master of Arts from the University of Southern California, and a bachelor's in both communications and political science from USC. She lives in the Bay Area with her husband and 2 children in the house that she grew up in. And I will just add that Becca is an amazing advocate for whatever she believes in, and has also raised innumerable amounts of money for pancreatic cancer, which we all appreciate. So with that said, Becca, I will turn this over to you. If you could say something about your food bank, and then the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. I'm sharing my wrong screen. Hold on, let me share my correct screen. But food bank, let me start there while I'm figuring out how to share my screen. The Silicon Valley, what's it called? This is my ADD in the morning. Sorry. Oh my gosh. Just put it in the chat. Who put it in the chat? So embarrassed that I've just like forgotten the actual name of the Silicon Valley Food Bank, but whatever. I work there every year. I go in person and they're great. And they, Silicon Valley, as I'm sure many of you know, is very expensive. And the food insecurity here is, thank you, Second Harvest. And that's my mom in the chat, by the way, mom for the win. Second Harvest is amazing. And I go every year. I've been going for a decade. They deliver millions of meals. And I think the statistics now in the Bay Area are like 20% of people and 30% of kids, or something insane, are food insecure. And so this is something that really, really, really matters in this area. So thank you to anybody who donates today. I'm really glad to be getting money for this cause. Really, 8 a.m. unmedicated ADHD is not, it's not a good look. But here we are, guys. You're gonna get it raw and unfiltered. So let me see if I can share my screen. There we go. So as Jean said, I'm here to talk about neurodiversity in the workplace. The introduction was fantastic. Honestly, when I hear somebody introduce me like that, it kind of reminds me that all of the ways I felt about myself as a neurodivergent weirdo my whole life are things I've concocted in my head to some degree, because I have been very successful despite life feeling hard and difficult for me in some ways. So I see you guys can see my screen, but I can't change my slide. There we go. So let me, before I get into kind of a bigger introduction about myself, let me go quickly over what I'm going to talk about today. And I'm going to be assuming that everyone's coming in with kind of a baseline understanding of neurodiversity, but I will define that. So first I'll talk about myself. I love questions. I love comments. So if you have anything, like raise your hand or interrupt me. I always interrupt everybody. It's one of the less attractive parts of my ADHD, but it's because I have ideas and I'm passionate. And so usually when I interrupt you, it means I'm very engaged. So I feel the same way. Feel free to interrupt me if you want to. And we're going to talk about neurodiversity in the workplace through the lens of how I've experienced it and my research, and the ways that I've helped to, I think, contribute to this conversation, both in my own workplaces and beyond, and my own journey. And we'll talk about why neurodiversity is a competitive advantage, which it is, especially in the workplace, and many of the issues that neurodivergent people face that neurotypical people might not even realize that they face, and recommendations on how maybe to be neuro-inclusive. I am going to buzz right through these things, but again, stop me if you need me to slow down or anything, because I do tend to talk fast. So about me. I'm really excited to be here. Really, truly. I love to talk to people about neurodiversity. I like to write about neurodiversity. And I'm really excited that this is like a new group of people from a different industry than I usually speak to, because usually I'm talking to people in tech, which very neurospicy or neurosparkly, however you like to say it, group. But I think the legal industry also a very neurospicy group. So before I jump in, I'm going to share a little bit about my background. As Jean mentioned, I'm a chief communications officer at a B2B tech company. And I've worked in tech for the bulk of my career, with a little stint in sports PR that was awesome, but exhausting. Grew up in the Bay Area, lived in London and LA for a while, and back to my hometown to raise my kids. Today I was invited on the show because over the past few years, I've become very vocal about neurodiversity. And it's been this wave of organic momentum. It wasn't like I set out to start talking about this or become a speaker, but I have. A speaker, a writer, a podcaster, a researcher, an advisor on the topic. And that's because I have ADHD and it impacts literally every aspect of my life. And now I have a child with dyslexia and dysgraphia and ADHD, which impacts every aspect of his life. And navigating the struggles of life as an undiagnosed neurodivergent person led me to want to help other people in their own kind of journey of discovery. And over the past few years has led me to become a real advocate in this, not just in the workplace, but also beyond. So I have some articles here just as a sample so that you know I'm not just full of shit and that I actually have something to say that other people think is interesting enough to put in some big name media publications. I also have podcasts and such. If you want to do a deeper dive on any of this, my website is beccahasadhd.com. Easy to remember. There's a lot more stuff there. So with that little intro, I also need to add a little caveat, which is, and you're lawyers, so you guys will appreciate this. I am not a trained psychologist or psychiatrist. I have not been formally trained in ADHD coaching. I'm here to talk about my experience as a neurodivergent executive, manager, person in the workplace, and the research that I've done and share my learnings with you all. So there's no way for me to capture the neurodivergent experience for everybody or cover all of the areas that I would cover in like a neurodiversity at work, intensive. This is just, a quick way for us to start to scratch the surface of the conversation. I really hope that by the end of this, actually, that everyone feels like a better appreciation of neurodiversity in the workplace and the impact, positive impact that it can have, not only in the workplace, but beyond the workplace too. So, oh, I just lost my notes. Oh, you can see my little stats here. 20 years in marketing and communications, 15 years diagnosed with ADHD, 9 years as a mother of a neurodivergent child, and then 4 years as a neurodiversity advocate and speaker, and a year as a neurodiversity ERG leader. We'll talk about that in a minute too. I can't change my slides. There we go. So what is neurodiversity? It seems appropriate to start this way, I guess. Neurodiversity refers to the natural variation in individual brain function, thinking styles, and behavioral traits regarded as part of the normal variation in the human population. And it's especially important for innovation and decision-making. The word neurodivergent refers to individual people who have things like ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, dyslexia, dyscalculia, dyspraxia, Tourette syndrome, blah, blah, blah. List goes on and on and on, sensory issues. These have been traditionally viewed as disorders. I mean, the word disorder, attention deficit disorder, it's in the name, right? Autism spectrum disorder. But neurodiversity, the neurodiversity movement actually advocates that we shift the thinking from it being disordered and just being a natural variation in the way that people think. And it's thought that 15 to 20% of the global population is neurodivergent in some way. That's 1 in 5 people. That's twice the number of left-handed people in the world and 20 times the number of people that have red hair by some estimates. So that's a lot of people. And it's the reason why I'm on this mission to change the notion that being neurodivergent is disordered, because just like the minority of the population are left-handed, it doesn't mean that they're disordered. It means they have to figure out how to be left-handed in a right-handed person's world. And I think about neurodiversity in that context as well, because there's a lot of difficulties that can come with being neurodivergent, but a lot of that is because we're neurodivergent people trying to survive by neurotypical standards or by majority norms that just fight against the way that our brains actually function. We let left-handed people have left-handed scissors, right? So like, why can't neurodivergent people have the tools that they need just to exist in the way that makes sense for them? So there's a lot of misunderstanding around the neurodivergent population, which is a huge population, and they do bring significant value. We bring significant value to organizations, and we just aren't embracing them in a meaningful enough way that empowers them to be as awesome as they can be at work. So, oops. Well, my correct slide did not get in, so please, you just ignore this. Ignore these. You're going to have to just listen to me talk to this one. I think it's helpful for me to like shed some light on my own neurodiversity journey because I was diagnosed in my 20s with ADHD. And I always knew, my whole life, that I was different from my peers. And since that moment of understanding, I guess that's my diagnosis, the moment of understanding, as I would call it, I've spent years trying to figure out how it impacts my life, how I build a family and a career and all of the things to accommodate my brain and to work with my ADD rather than work against it. And those traits abound. I am ADD as I get. Personality traits are very somebody with ADHD, and I felt and I acted different. Oh, is my internet cutting out right now? Okay, just making sure. I got a little alert from my Zoom saying it was unstable. Sorry, ADD. Since I felt and acted different, I spent my whole life masking, and just masking is the idea that I spent every minute of every day trying to be what I thought was normal, like copying the people around me, trying to emulate the way that they acted. And I still do that in lots of situations, and to a degree with most people. And it's really, really exhausting having to act the social norms that kind of fight against your instinct, is really tiring. And I spent my whole life trying to mask that. And I spent my whole childhood and early adulthood feeling like I was a failure, feeling different, knowing that I was smart, but somehow feeling like the dumbest person in every room, no matter where I was. And it felt like everyone else had been given kind of like the script of like how to do life, and they knew when they got somewhere like what they were supposed to do. And I always felt like, what am I doing here? Like, can someone give me instructions? Like, I need a little bit of help. Like, but I didn't know that I needed help, and I didn't know that my experience was different. I just knew that everyone else seemed easier for them. And it wasn't until I was diagnosed that I was able to gather all of that information to really understand that I can process the world around me. I just do it in a very different way. And I wasn't flagged as a neurodivergent child because, well, it was the 80s and I wasn't a bouncy little boy, right? I was, in fact, brushed off as being disruptive. Becca has so much potential if she would just focus. Oppositional, unmotivated, you name it, really a list of executive functioning failure related symptoms that are entirely predictive of unmanaged ADHD. But I think often about how my experience might have been different with just the right supports, or even just the knowledge of like why it felt harder for me. And that's become more important to me now that I have kids, way more important to me, because now I not only need to understand and navigate the way that my own brain processes the world and how I fit into it, but also how society and schools and the workplace and everybody else deals with the neurodivergent people like my children too. And from my experience and observations is actually not very good. So it means that I have to bring my husband into this journey, my probably neurotypical husband who doesn't understand any of this at all. The way of my son and my existing is foreign to him, right? And I have to help him understand that we are just different. And the fact that I experienced that even in my own household means that society is so far behind, right? Where we need to be in just understanding how the variations of brain function work. And then this is all to say that I live in the Bay Area, and I live somewhere where people are weird and neurodivergent as hell. And in Silicon Valley, it's innovation central, and the schools can cater to kids who have dyslexia, for example. And a lot of people around me are neurodivergent and quirky. So it's more acceptable for me to be different. But there are places where I would not be accepted by the way that I am. And I think that I'm lucky that I live here and I'm able to kind of be more vocal and open about it, because I have figured out how to like work with my brain, and do things that I wouldn't be able to do otherwise. Anyway, so back to my journey. Well, having a neurodivergent brain in a neurotypical world is difficult. It's also really easy for us to only focus on the deficits. And I think that as I've grown into adulthood and in my career, I've come to realize that so much of my success is directly attributable to the fact that I'm neurodivergent, the fact that I have ADHD. I can do things that absolutely none of my coworkers can do. And I've been able to do stuff since I was in elementary school that none of my peers could do. And I didn't know that because I spent all of my time focused on the things that I felt made me bad or wrong or broken, and not on the things that made me awesome. And so now that I figured out how to parlay the great parts of neurodivergence into success, I've become confident and comfortable in my neurodivergent brain. And I've learned that it's safe to unmask. And like I have to button up, right? Like sometimes you have to be buttoned up and act normal, but I've learned how to advocate for myself. And I've learned how to exist in those places without being completely inauthentic to myself. And it's become central to my identity, and I'm passionate about it. And in the most recent chapter of my neurodivergent journey, I've founded and led employee resource groups and surveyed thousands of neurodivergent people about their experience and created safe spaces for these conversations, because these conversations just haven't existed. And in the process, I've had people tell me how much it's meant to them to just see representation in this way in the workplace and on the executive team. And I've heard from coworkers that I barely know that they feel like they feel like they can finally talk to their manager about their needs, or they feel brave enough to advocate for themselves or tell their coworkers, hey, this is the way that I need to work. And I just showing up and having the conversation is what this is about for me. So all this to say, neurodiversity is a competitive advantage. And that's what I'm here really to talk about and get through to everybody today, because there is an abundance of research that shows that neurodiversity in the workplace is a competitive advantage. And that teams with a higher degree of neurodiversity are more innovative, better problem solvers, and have much higher rates of productivity. So if you want to do a deep dive, Harvard Business Review published an article called Neurodiversity is a Competitive Advantage way back in 2017. So that's 7 years ago. And we're still now only just starting to scratch the surface of this discussion, but it is a discussion and there is data to back it up. So a few fun facts. Neuro-inclusive workforces achieved 28% higher revenue, 30% greater profit margins, and double the net income compared to their competitors. That's according to Accenture and the American Association of People with Disabilities, who tracked outcomes of companies that have distinct neurodiversity inclusion programs, policies, practices. Wow, that's real data. According to the Australia Department of Human Services, neurodiverse teams, which means they include both neurodivergent and neurotypical people, are 30% more productive than those without neurodivergent teammates. Wow. What else? Did you know that people with autism have been shown to be 90 to 120% more productive than their allistic, aka non-autistic peers? That's like having two workers in one, twice as 100% more productive. Wow. So neurodivergent people typically have these amazing qualities that neurotypical people might not. And that's because we have deficits. And with all of these deficits come these amazing abilities too. You know, it's balance, right? And for example, near and dear to my heart, people with ADHD tend to have heightened creativity, a knack for thinking outside the box. That's what's made me successful in my career. I'm passionate, I'm energetic, I'm intuitive, I'm empathetic. I'm a really good leader because I can get into these deep conversations with people and not be uncomfortable. I'm a probing person. All of these things are my ADHD traits. And I learned how I can use them as a benefit, right? And in fact, I read recently that ADHD people are 400% more likely to start a business. That's because we're entrepreneurial, right? We have that spirit. And I think there's a lot of people in the legal profession probably who relate to that. Same with people with autism, excelling in analytical thinking, attention to detail, pattern recognition, super passionate, dedicated, ability to focus, hyperfocus. Hyperfocus is amazing. That's like my jam. Like I can get into a 2-day hyperfocus and get 6 months of work done like that. In fact, I wrote my entire graduate school with distinction dissertation in 2 days. I was supposed to spend 6 months writing it, but 2 days. And my mom, like I said, who was on this call, had to edit it in those last few hours for me because she's a lawyer and I'm not. So I've sidetracked myself. Dyslexic people have superior spatial reasoning and problem-solving skills. So the same function in their brain that makes letters swap or whatever also makes them see in 3D, literally, giving them like this ability to process visual spatial information kind of as like a big picture rather than pieces of a big picture, which is why lots of dyslexic people excel in art or engineering or science-based things. And in fact, I heard recently a story about Nikola Tesla, who he built everything in his brain, wouldn't write a single thing down until it worked in his mind. He is thought to be dyslexic, by the way. That's crazy. Can you imagine like building working machines in your mind before you ever put pen to page? Well, that's a dyslexic brain for you. These unique abilities, perspectives, they can be really, really valuable in the workplace. I mean, even outside the workplace and across lots of industries. And in a minute, I'll share some stats about the legal industry in particular, since I know that that's particularly relevant to this group. But there are companies and organizations that have recognized the benefits of neurodiversity and are actively seeking to recruit and accommodate neurodivergent people. For example, 3 good examples, actually more than 3, but I'll give you 3 quick ones. There's an entire unit called the CGHQ in the UK. It's like their cybersecurity, like spy agency that exclusively recruits people with dyslexia. And that's because they are so much better at pattern recognition and like future gaming scenarios that non-dyslexic people just can't do it. So they're like, bring me your dyslexic. We're going to have a whole crew. And of course, they then have to learn how to accommodate them too, right? Because neurodivergent people require different types of accommodations. Similarly, the Australian Defense Department is now working to develop a neurodiversity program in cybersecurity based off of a very successful program in Israel, Israel's Special Intelligence Unit 9900, it's apparently like super special, found, quote, off the charts abilities in their neurodivergent staff versus their neurotypical counterparts. 3 different government agencies right there, specifically recruiting for people who have neurodivergent traits. And it's not just government agencies, right? Private companies are realizing this too. Some of this data comes from these private companies that are investing in their neurodivergent populations. HP and SAP are a couple that have some really good programs, and so they have data coming out of it. SAP reported their neurodivergent employees are 140% as productive as their neurotypical peers. Again, that's like 2.5 employees for the price of 1, right? Like the productivity you get from that one person, that's amazing. And all you need to do are make small accommodations to make their lives a little easier and make them feel more of a sense of belonging. HP's program has proven super successful and is a source of data for other companies that are looking to implement neuro-inclusive policies. So if anyone's interested, go check out HP's website. They've got a lot there. But their data has shown that it leads to tangible business outcomes, better business outcomes. So it's not like, oh, we're here just trying to be nice and inclusive. It's not about that. It's about business outcomes. It's about making more money at the end of the day. And it just happens to be a nice effect that it also impacts neurodivergent people positively. One thing that I think isn't discussed enough as a kind of a final thought on like the strengths of neurodivergent people is neurodivergent people have really high standards. Obviously, I'm making broad generalizations. Not all neurodivergent people are the same, but as a generalization, we tend to be perfectionists. We tend to care about things being done well, being done to a standard that we can be proud of. And that's a really important quality in people that you work with, right? Like if we're loyal and we care about the people that we work with and we have very high standards, like that is your ideal employee. That is your ideal teammate. That's the person that I want on my team or that I want to be working with. And I just think the more people that know that, the more people that understand that, the less barriers they may be to things like, oh, well, they didn't make eye contact with me during an interview, so they're a little weird. It's like, but if you understand all of these other great things, does the eye contact really matter at that point? So let's look at neurodiversity in the legal profession, since I know this is relevant to many of you. And anecdotally, I've always thought that lawyers were disproportionately neurodivergent compared to the general population because I come from a family of lawyers. And let me tell you, They are definitely neurodivergent. So, and it's not just my family members, it's their legal partners and their coworkers. And then based on my research last night, it appears that this assumption is correct because, oh, I see a comment. I see lots of comments actually. ADD, I'll have to look at those in a second. The, I lost my train of thought. What was I talking about? Oh, my family of lawyers and their partners and whatever, and the data I found last night. So according to a 2016 study, so again, 8 years ago by the ABA, 12.5% of lawyers reported having ADHD compared to 4 to 5% of the general population. That's like 2 to 3 times the number of lawyers that are ADHD compared to the general population. And that's just ADHD. That does not include autism, right? That does not include dyslexia, does not include any of the other things that fall into the neurodiversity spectrum. So needless to say, the legal profession is filled with neurodivergent people. Whether they know it, whether you know it, whether anybody knows it, it means that it's not like a nice to have to embrace and understand neurodiversity. It's actually essential. Like 1 in 5 people, they're all around us everywhere. And then there's this Netflix series. I don't know if anyone's watched it. I haven't watched it. The Extraordinary Attorney Wu. It's literally a series about a lawyer with autism. And apparently it does a really good job showing the autistic experience. So worth checking out. But it makes sense, right? Like qualities of neurodivergent people. The list on the right is just some of the traits and characteristics that neurodivergent people bring to the table. And it's not exhaustive. And it's not true of all neurodivergent people. But when you look at the traits, you can start to see how they trend towards certain industries, right? I work in marketing, tons of neurodivergent people. Cybersecurity, tons of neurodivergent people. And I can see how neurodivergent people would gravitate towards the legal profession. Attention to detail, deep focus. My childhood is just a memory of my mom staying up all night, like finishing whatever brief she was working on, which by the way has carried over into me, and that's how I work now. Unique problem solving, right? The ability to like look at a problem from a different angle and find like novel solutions that somebody else might not. Consistency and reliability. We can do repetitive tasks that might be boring to other people. I mean, I might get ADD'd out of here and have to go do something else, but some autistic people can just jam away at the same thing all day, and I am so jealous of that ability. I can also like show up with enthusiasm for things that are seemingly tedious to other people, and I can show up with a lot of empathy and insight. I think insight is an important thing that neurodivergent people bring to the table that is super important for the workplace, right? Seeing around corners, getting a vibe, right? Like you need to understand people really well. And there is this kind of assumption that neurodivergent people are worse at reading people than others. I don't think that's true. I think we end up being better at reading people because I didn't have the script growing up. I had to watch everybody around me to learn how to act and behave. So now I am really clued in to little tiny changes in people's behavior or moods or whatever. And that's a very valuable skill when you're working with people every day. Systematic thinking, we talked a little bit about that, but systems, patterns, being able to recognize things that other people might not see, high levels of integrity. Talk about an important skill in the workplace, right? We can be really straightforward. That can come off as blunt and rude, or we can be really straightforward because we're being honest and we don't want to talk around and have the bullshit conversations. We just are saying what is true or what is on our mind or what we're thinking. That can be a really important skill. Loyalty, talked about that already. Creative thinking, my favorite. I would be nowhere without my ADHD creativity. Specialized skills. This is something that, you know, there are stigmas around this, like, oh, all autistic people have a special interest or a special skill. Absolutely not true. In fact, I'm not autistic. I have ADHD. I had no skills growing up. Like literally, what hobbies do you have? None. I wasn't good at sports. I wasn't good at school. I didn't like to draw or color, you know, whatever. I had interests that varied by the day. But some people have specialized skill sets that allow them to do things that nobody else can do, or they can do the things that other people can do in such a better way than anybody can do it. And it might just be as simple as I'm a better writer. I'm a better editor. I'm a better people person, communicator, but whatever those specialized skills are, if you are better at one thing than everybody else, like that is highly valuable. being well-rounded isn't always what you need in an employee. Sometimes you just need somebody who's very good at what they do. And then enhanced memory. I do not have this. I have a terrible memory, but certain neurodivergent people have very good recall. My son can remember details from when he was 3 years old in like color, and I can't remember things from yesterday. And then diverse cognitive approaches. I think this kind of sums it all up. It's bringing a mix of ideas and styles and having people with diversity of thought, just like having people with diversity of backgrounds is important to driving, you know, innovation and outcomes and all of that. Having diversity of thought fits in that same bucket. So I think I've well established now that having a neurodiverse workforce is better than not. But if that workforce isn't supported, can they actually function at their best? And I know that I can't get invested into a project until I clearly understand the outcome, what I'm trying to achieve, and then I can back into it, right? And I can solve a particular task. But I also do much better if I have time to process information on my own. So if you throw me into a brainstorming session and say, Becca, what should we do? If I haven't had time to go and like think in the way that I need to think, I am not productive, right? Give me a minute to think about my thoughts. And if my boss says, well, this is the way that we do this on our team, you're not going to get the best from me. You're not going to get what you need from me as your employee or as your teammate, because I need to go process information in a different way. So that brings me to the issues that we face. But one sec, I want to look at the comments and just see if there's anything I need to address before I move on. Divergent thinking is incredibly helpful in creative problem solving. Very true. Folks with disabilities also have been shown to be relatively more loyal than their counterparts. Truth. Hey, neurodiversity civil rights lawyer, that's cool. The empathy quotient of neurodiverse folks is unmatched and makes for great client connection abilities. Yes. As someone who works as an administrative law judge and mediator on issues involving special needs and children, I very much appreciate the presentation. Well, great, thanks. Awesome. Sorry, I had to look at those or else they were going to be there simmering in my brain. But maybe that gave you guys a chance to check out the slide. So I made this to share with my company a couple of years ago, actually, because why does it matter that we make accommodations for neurodivergent people, right? Oh, so-and-so needs, you know, special sound to get their work done. And people can kind of brush that off as like silly or, you know, not that important. But like, let's look at some of the issues that neurodivergent people face. It's not as simple as I get distracted easily, right? We are marginalized, just like other groups that can be marginalized. And if you represent more than one of these marginalized groups, you face even more massive barriers. So they can be compounded. So let's look at these and let's think about how simple some of these could be to mitigate. And I feel some of these every single day, every day of my life, even in a very neuro-inclusive work environment. And this is not an exhaustive list, but it shows some of the barriers that neurotypical people might not even think about. They're kind of grouped-ish thematically, so that you can see that they range from communication issues to sensory issues to inadequate support at work to pervasive stigmas and discrimination that come with just being different or open about your neurodivergence. And I won't go into detail about each of these, but quick snapshot, interviewing challenges. I'm actually going to talk a little bit more about that, but this is one of the biggest places that neurodivergent people get screwed in the workplace. And that's because the traditional interview process, which is interpersonal skills and culture fit, and are we making eye contact, and are you poised and whatever, that stuff doesn't always matter for you to be able to do your job. But if that's the thing that you're screening for in your interview process, it's broken and it's not inclusive of neurodivergent people who might not be great at eye contact. I hate making eye contact. Really, truly, I hate it. But like, I will do it. And then I will sit in the interview, not being able to focus on the things that I need to because I'm staring at your eyes, right? And there are ways that you can mitigate that just to make it a little bit easier for them. Communication challenges, performance evaluations, career progression, sensory overload, changing a work environment just so people can work in the way they need to is huge. Bright lights, loud noises. I'm sitting here, I have a weighted blanket on my lap right now. Would I do that in an office? Probably not, because people would think it was weird. That would be, this is me masking, not wearing it. But like here at home, I'm weighted blanket, my sensory I'm working with my sensory needs, right? Physical environment changes, structural inflexibility. I'm going to talk about that. And then disclosure dilemmas, mental health concerns, burnout. Burnout among the neurodivergent population is massive. And then misunderstanding, lack of awareness. There are a lot of challenges, and they're all the time. They're not one sometimes and then it goes away. But it turns out that the accommodations that you need to alleviate the strain on neurodivergent people are, one, not expensive, and two, not that hard to implement. And so it feels like there's no reason why we can't be more neuro inclusive in the workplace and beyond. So I want to leave time for questions. Do you guys want me to go over this, or should we like do questions instead? Opinions?
We still have quite a bit of time, Becca. So
Okay.
if there's more that you'd like to explain, please feel welcome.
All right. I want to talk about how, in broad strokes, how to enable the neurodivergent employee experience, because being neuro-inclusive isn't a one-size-fits-all approach, and no two neurodivergent people have the same accommodation needs. So it can be hard to even know where do you start, because if Becca needs one thing and somebody needs the other, how do I solve for both of those? But there's something that I want to call out, and that is that what works for neurodivergent people also typically works for neurotypical people too. So like when you ask somebody, how do they prefer to work? That shouldn't just apply to neurodiverse people. That should also apply to your neurotypical people, because they benefit also, because they have different ways of working from each other. Nobody works in the same exact way. So I say that because these accommodations can apply to everybody. And I broadly bucket them into three groups of how to affect change. Flexibility. We can create a conducive work environment. It means respecting the way that people want to work, being more inclusive around other people's working styles. It's not saying my way is the right way of working. It's about saying there are lots of ways to do things. I'm not going to prescribe to you how you do it, but these are the outcomes that I'm trying to drive. It means communicating and asking your employees about their preferences. How do you like to communicate? Should I IM you? Should I email? Do you need the agenda up front? Do you need a quiet working space? Do you want to be off Zoom? Like, how can I help just make your environment more conducive to how you want to work? Do you need tools? Do you need a transcription service for notes? Cool. Let me help you get that. Companies that allow flexible work, remote work, are already leading the way here, because that gives employees, again, like me, I'm sitting here with my weighted blanket. I can create my ideal workspace. Work doesn't even have to think about it, and I don't have to ask for it. I can just do what I need to do. I can move from my office to the couch if I need to. I can change the lighting. I can change the sound. I can have my background noise, which I need to calm the sound in my head in order to focus, but I can't have that in an office, right? I can't have that around other people per se, or I might not want to because I don't want to show that side of me to other people. I think that there's a way to help people feel more understood just by being slightly more flexible. But that requires a dialogue. It requires a dialogue to accommodate neurodiverse employees, because you can't always see that somebody is neurodivergent, right? You don't know what their needs are. So it requires you to be communicative with them. And that brings me to number two, understanding and awareness. Open conversations about neurodiversity. Start those conversations. Ask people their preferred communication style. Advocate for your teammates. The most important moment of my professional career as a neurodivergent person was when my boss, a CMO, defended me in a room full of executives when someone commented on the fact that I wasn't buttoned up. A comment that I've heard way too many times in my career, by the way. And she clapped back at him and was like, Becca might not look like the rest of us do while she's working. She's 10 steps ahead of us. She's running circles around all of us. And just watch what she can do. Just wait, watch what she can do. And she was right. I knew she was right, but I was letting this, like, I need to be like everybody else, get in my way. They needed to have an awareness. They needed to have some understanding, and having this advocate, this person, give them that was life-changing for me, right? So that's something that we can all do in the workplace. Is say, hey, Becca's a little bouncy. That doesn't take away from the outcomes that she's driving, right? Like, let's create some belonging. Let's create some psychological safety to let her be herself while she's at work. And all you need to do is understand that that's the way that she is. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the communication piece in just like for 1 second in a minute. And then this leads like to the last bucket, which is hiring and retention. And I did talk about that. This is key. Neurodivergent people face challenges in the hiring process for a lot of reasons, but they're often really stupid, irrelevant reasons, like you're too fidgety, or you're not making the eye contact, or it takes you too long to respond to a question because it takes you a little bit longer to process it. But those things shouldn't disqualify you from work because maybe they don't matter for your job, right? Like simple adjustments can be monumentally helpful. Someone needs to know what the process looks like before an interview, right? Or have the first call be off camera so that they can get comfortable, or send the questions to them in advance so they have time to gather their thoughts. Why do people have to be able to answer on the spot? I have very few things that ever happen in my work that I have to be able to do immediately, right? So why should I have to prove that in an interview? We might be filtering out really, really, really awesome candidates just because they are not passing these like arbitrary check boxes that they're supposed to. And I have a personal story about this that is almost a decade old, but it eats at me, still eats at me. And I was interviewing at this tech company and I was weeks, maybe months into the process. I talked to every single person there, it seemed like. I'd met the whole team. I'd given short-term, long-term strategy presentations. I'd wowed everybody. I was an amazing fit for this role. And the last checkbox was just getting the CEO to sign off. I'm a comms person, which means that I would have to interface with them a lot. And this is a famous CEO, mind you, somebody very well known in the industry. And so I was rightfully nervous, but I was prepared. I go into the interview, I nail all the questions. I'm poised, I'm confident, I'm making the eye contact, even though I'm dying inside because I hate it. And I'm masking hard so that I can get this job. I walked out of the room and I was like, I nailed that. Only to be met at the elevator immediately by the hiring manager who said, oh, I'm so sorry. He said no because you were fidgeting with the tab of your tea bag that was hanging outside of your cup. And I was like, what? What? I mean, I was literally flabbergasted. I could not believe that weeks, months that all of us had put in, not just me, these other people at the company too. I checked every single box only to be lost, only to lose this opportunity because I was slightly fidgeting with my hands in an interview. And this guy decided that I wouldn't have been a good representative of the company. My ADHD disqualified me from my job. That is BS. And I just needed to call out that example because this is happening constantly, all the time. All of us do it. We all have biases if people don't fit into the exact social norms that we expect in those brief interviews, and it's not enough to just show up and hope that your bias isn't going to get in the way. So we know that neurodivergent people bring unique skills to the business that make our teams better. If we invest in our neurodivergent population, we can help them reach their full potential, create belonging, make them want to stay, reach that 140% productivity that they can bring, and it's a win-win. So if we empower our neurodivergent crew, more flexibility, understanding from others, especially team managers, and looking at our hiring and recruitment processes, it will entirely change the game. Now I am going to leave a few minutes for questions. Though I do have, I'm just going to leave this slide up while we talk, if anyone has questions.
So Becca, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people on this line are mediators, and we're dealing with people on the day that's designated to try to resolve their dispute. And people come in, the clients, for a lot of them, it's the worst day of their lives. They're coming up that elevator and it reactivates all the stuff about the dispute and the conflict. And so we see people nervous, fidgety, upset, anxious, all the rest. And we try to deal with them in ways that are appropriate and positive and helpful. How can we distinguish between somebody who is neurodiverse or somebody who is neurotypical and just feeling a lot of the stress of the situation? And in terms of dealing with people appropriately, how do we know exactly what to do in the instant to to be appropriate and helpful to people?
That's a really good question. And the answer is you won't know. You won't know if somebody is neurodivergent or neurotypical, right? You might know that somebody is having a problem regulating, because neurotypical people have problems regulating just as much as neurodiverse people. Neurodivergent people, just, it happens more often and maybe in a more extreme way. But if it's the worst day of their life and they're coming in to do this very stressful thing, I imagine the worst comes out in people. And you probably, this goes back to the accommodations that you make for neurodivergent people are true for neurotypical people too. And neurotypical people might like to use a fidget toy to help regulate a little bit, right? Somebody who's having an anxiety attack, whether or not that's new to them or something that they're used to all the time, might benefit from whatever sensory calming things that they need. And I think it really comes down to engaging in the conversation. And that's actually what this slide that's up here right now that I didn't talk about, but it's like, normalize the conversation. Ask them, hey, I know this is really stressful. This is a really stressful moment. When I've worked with other people in this, these are things that have been helpful for them. Would that be helpful for you? Don't assume things, right? Don't say, hey, here, here's a Kleenex box in case you want to cry. It's not about that. It's just about recognizing, hey, like, this is hard. And like, whatever let me know what you need. How can I help you? Like, do you need a minute? I've created, like, there's a quiet room over here if you need to just go like collect your thoughts, whatever. Just have the conversation, I think gets you 90% of where you need to be. At least for me, if someone just said to me like, do you need to just like walk around the block? I might just be like, oh my God, yes, thank you. Because I just need a break. And I don't want to say like, I need to walk out of here because I'm on the screen, right? So I think that the name of the game is the communication piece and just asking.
Can you give any other specific examples of approaches that might be positive and helpful and welcome, as opposed to things that just, make you wince and say, oh my God, how could that person possibly have said that?
That's also a really good question, because I firmly believe that like what I need as an ADHD person is not the same as like what somebody with autism might need. But in the moments that you're describing, like they might be the same. And I really think that it comes down to just saying like, this is hard. How can I help? Like just as simple as that, because sometimes neurodivergent people struggle with the fact that they know that they have different needs, but they don't know how to articulate it. And so if you can just kind of open the door for that, I think that goes a really long way, because I don't think that there's a one size fits all approach. I think having the open dialogue and then a place, like a physical safe space for people who just need a break can go a really long way, whether that's in an office or whether that's, I don't know where you guys do your.
And do we risk running afoul of any laws that limit inquiries about these kinds of things if we ask about?
Probably if you ask if somebody is neurodivergent, but if you say, this is a really stressful situation, typically my clients are feeling X, Y, or Z. Is there a way that I can help make this easier for you? Or you seem worried, or this seems like it's causing you strife. Like, I think like naming this is hard and how can I help? Like that's all sometimes that is necessary. And I don't know about legalities. I don't think that would be an issue. Hasn't been an issue in my workplace.
Good. Well, this is very helpful. We have a minute or two. Jenica, I see you've been active in the chat. Do you have a question or two you'd like to pose to Becca?
I do. Full disclosure, Rebecca's my sister. I am a neurodivergent lawyer. There I am. So do you have recommendations for those of us who have our own neurodiversities, who also recognize neurodivergent patterns in bosses or supervisors, and how best to, without diagnosing them, which they probably don't want to hear because they're usually older than me, how to navigate that? Because it's very clear to me, but yeah.
I deal with this a lot myself, actually, because I do recognize that other people are neurodivergent before they might recognize it in certain people, right? Or if their children are neurodivergent, it's often that the parents are too and don't know it. I think you have to manage up in the same way you would manage a neurotypical manager who has their issues, which is just figuring out their working style. How do you like to work? You know, like, do you want me to email you? Do you want me to IM you? Are you the person who texts? Like learning their style and adapting to it. But it's not just your manager, right? It's like everybody that you work with. You should all be communicating your needs. Like you also should be communicating your needs. But if you recognize the patterns in them, that it's like, okay, this person is neurodivergent in these ways, like you're a neurodivergent person, like I think you can relate to them without naming it, right? Because not everybody is like in that place in their journey that they actually want to know these things, but they do know how they like things. Like everybody knows that I either work with music on or I don't work with, like everyone has their preferences. So I think it's really just about like reaching out and saying like, I want to understand how you work best so that I can help accommodate that. It's just good practice, right? Whether or not the person is neurodivergent. That's how I've approached it with people in my life, especially the very difficult people, is like, let's come to an understanding of how we like to work with each other.
Okay, we have 1 minute left. Sue Popick, do you have any questions?
Sue Popick.
I have greatly enjoyed listening to this.
That's my mom, everybody. My mom and my sister are my hype ladies. So thank you for joining my lawyer crew here, coming to support me. I don't think they've ever watched me actually talk about neurodiversity live. So it's been fun. My final thought for everybody, actually, right as we're leaving, because it's what I like to leave with, is focus on outcomes. That means that the process shouldn't matter. And I know for a lot of us, we can be rigid in our process, especially neurodivergent people, because our process is not like other people's. We have to create these coping mechanisms in order to get things done. So dictating process is going to lead to failure or lead to less productivity. Focus on the outcomes instead of the inputs. Release control over where, when, and how people do their jobs, and focus on whether they are doing a good job. The process isn't what matters, the outcomes that matter. This is true for all people, but especially neurodivergent people. And I have to remind my husband of this because my son's process looks different and my process looks different. And there we are.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Laura Athens, if you can make it the 10-second question, please go ahead.
I just wondered if you consider people with cognitive disabilities or cognitive impairments to be neurodiverse, and what kinds of contributions do you think they make to the workplace?
That's a good, I don't have yes, they are considered part of the neurodiversity umbrella. I don't have a good answer. I think that there is such a long way to go on even just the conversation about this that I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I think that there's a place.
Thank you. Thank you for answering the question and for considering them neurodiverse, because I do believe that they are. But I think you're right. There needs to be a lot more conversation about the contributions, the unique contributions they can make.
That's the thing. And I think it's really about that, like, not everybody needs to be this well-rounded pick. Like, let's just focus on what people are good at sometimes, right? And like, I think that there is a lot of that discussion that needs to happen when you get into people who really can't do certain things, but can do certain things. And I just think we're not at like a maturity level yet where that conversation is happening in a really large, meaningful way, but it is starting to happen in like pockets of organizations. So
thank you, Becca. Wonderful presentation.
Yes.
Thanks for having me.
Unfortunately, we are out of time and we have to respect the clock. So Becca Chambers, thank you so much for a very insightful and comprehensive presentation on the subject. On behalf of Natalie Armstrong-Motan and Jean Lawler, we thank not only you, Becca, but everybody for being here. We hope that everyone who's in a position to contributes to Second Harvest of Silicon Valley in your honor, or another food bank of their choice in your honor. I know we will raise a lot of money to help fight food insecurity because of today's wonderful presentation. And that's what it's all about. And with that, my friends, we are complete.
Thanks, everyone.